The distress beacon cut through the void of space like a knife through silk. Its frantic pulse echoed across 17 star systems before reaching the outer monitoring stations of the Terran Federation. What made this signal different from the countless others wasn't its urgency. Emergency transmissions were common enough in the galaxy's outer rim. What made this one special was the language it was broadcast in. Human. Commander Sarah Chen stood, frozen in the communications bay of Station Theta 7, her coffee cup trembling in her hand as the translated message played for the third time. Around her, the usual chatter of the night shift had died to absolute silence. "Please." The voice crackled through the speakers, distorted by distance and desperation. "Anyone who can hear this, we are the survivors of Kepler 442b. The hegemony has come. They've taken our children. They've burned our cities. We managed to escape in a single ship, but we won't last long. If there are any humans left out there, please, we're sending our coordinates. We have nowhere else to run." The transmission ended with a burst of static, leaving only the hum of the station's life support systems to fill the terrible quiet. Sarah's second-in-command, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez, broke the silence first. "Commander, that accent, that's definitely from one of the lost colonies. Has to be from the Exodus era, maybe 200 years ago." Sarah nodded grimly. During humanity's great expansion period, thousands of colony ships had launched into the unknown, seeking new worlds far beyond the established shipping lanes. Many had never been heard from again. The Terran Federation had assumed most were lost to the hazards of deep space travel, mechanical failures, cosmic radiation, or simple navigation errors that sent them tumbling into the void. They'd never considered that some might have found their new homes, only to face horrors beyond imagination. "Rodriguez, I want a full analysis of that signal. Track its origin point, estimate the ship's capabilities, and get me everything we can about the hegemony." Sarah's voice was steady, but her knuckles were white as she gripped her cup. "And send a priority message to Admiral Harrison at Fleet Command. Tell him we have a Code 7 situation." "Ma'am," Rodriguez hesitated. "A Code 7? That's reserved for threats to human existence itself." Sarah turned to face him, and he saw something in her eyes that made him step back. It wasn't fear. It was the cold, calculating fury of a predator that had just spotted prey. "Lieutenant, somewhere out there, humans are being hunted like animals. Their children have been taken. Their homes have been burned." She set down her coffee cup with deliberate precision. "If that's not a threat to human existence, then I don't know what is." As Rodriguez hurried to carry out her orders, Sarah stared out through the viewport at the stars. Somewhere among those distant points of light, fellow humans were crying out for help, and for the first time in 2 centuries, humanity was going to answer. What the survivors of Kepler 442b didn't know, what they couldn't have possibly known, was that they weren't calling out to some struggling remnant of their homeworld. They were calling out to an interstellar civilization that had spent the last 200 years perfecting the art of war, and humanity had gotten very, very good at it. Chapter 2. The War Council. The emergency session of the Terran Federation, War Council, convened 18 hours after the distress signal reached Station Theta 7. In the secure chambers deep beneath Luna City, Earth's moon had been transformed into the military nerve center of human space. The room itself was a testament to humanity's rise. Holographic displays showed real-time positions of fleet assets across 47 star systems, while quantum communicators linked the Council to field commanders stationed light years away. Admiral Elena Harrison, Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Forces, stood at the head of the crescent-shaped table. At 65, she was a veteran of the Centauri Rebellion, the Proxima Border Wars, and the devastating conflict with the silicon-based crystalline entities. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her uniform bore the scars of 3 decades of military service, including a prosthetic left arm she'd earned fighting the crystal hives of Alpha Centauri. Around the table sat the most powerful military minds in human space. General Zhang Wei, commander of the Federation Marines; Admiral Okafor, head of intelligence operations; Fleet Admiral Martinez, in charge of the Rapid Response Strike Forces. Each of them had received the same briefing packet that Harrison now tapped against the polished metal surface. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had never lost a strategic engagement. 3 hours ago, our xenobiology team finished their analysis of the transmitted data from the Kepler colony survivors. What they found... She paused, her jaw tightening. What they found changes everything. The central holographic display flickered to life, showing a three-dimensional reconstruction of an alien creature. It stood roughly 8 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws. Its hide looked like living metal, and its elongated skull housed multiple rows of teeth. But what made the assembly inhale sharply wasn't the creature's fearsome appearance. It was the collar around its neck, a collar that bore human writing. "The hegemony," Harrison continued, "isn't just another alien empire expanding into human territory. According to the survivors' testimonies, they've been systematically hunting down human colonies for decades. But here's what makes it worse. They're not killing everyone. They're taking survivors as slaves. Our xenobiology team believes this creature, designated as a harvester by the colonists, has been selectively bred to hunt humans specifically." General Zhang leaned forward, his weathered face grim. "Ma'am, are you saying these things were designed to hunt us?" "That's exactly what I'm saying, General. The survivors reported that the hegemony forces knew exactly where to strike their settlements for maximum psychological impact. They targeted schools first, medical facilities second. They wanted the population alive and terrified." Harrison's prosthetic hand clenched into a fist. "They've turned hunting humans into a science." Admiral Okafor, a tall woman whose intelligence networks spanned half the galaxy, raised her hand. "What's our current intel on hegemony force strength? Do we know what we're up against?" Harrison nodded to her aide, who activated another display. This one showed a rough map of the galaxy's outer spiral arm, with several systems marked in ominous red. "Based on the survivors' reports and our own deep space reconnaissance, we estimate the hegemony controls approximately 23 star systems. Their military doctrine appears to be built around rapid strikes and slave acquisition rather than territorial expansion." Harrison's expression darkened. "But here's the part that should concern us all. According to the colonists, the hegemony has been doing this for over 50 years. Which means they have thousands of human slaves." Fleet Admiral Martinez finished, quietly. "Maybe tens of thousands." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Somewhere in the depths of space, an alien empire had been systematically enslaving humanity's lost children for half a century. The thought was almost too enormous to grasp. But Admiral Harrison hadn't become Supreme Commander by being overwhelmed by impossible situations. 3 hours ago, I authorized Operation Homecoming," she announced, standing straighter. "We're going to find every human slave in hegemony space, and we're going to bring them home. All of them." General Zhang cleared his throat. "Ma'am, with respect, our current force deployment has us stretched across 47 systems. A major offensive against an unknown enemy would require pulling assets from—" "General," Harrison interrupted, and her voice carried the steel that had made her legendary. "I want you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. 24 hours ago, a group of humans, our humans, transmitted a desperate plea for help into the void. They didn't know if anyone would hear them. They didn't know if anyone would care. But they called out anyway because they still had hope that somewhere out there, their fellow humans would answer." She walked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes in turn. "For 200 years, we've been building this military not to conquer, but to protect. We fought crystal entities that could dissolve starships with a thought. We've battled silicon-based hive minds that treated entire planets like disposable resources. We faced down cosmic horrors that would have driven our ancestors insane, just to look at them. And we've won every single time. Do you know why?" The question hung in the air. "Because we never, ever abandon our own. Not a single human gets left behind. Not on our watch." Harrison's voice rose slightly. "So yes, General, we're going to redeploy every asset we have. We're going to pull forces from every system that can spare them. We're going to mobilize the reserves, activate the emergency protocols, and put every single warship humanity has ever built into this operation. She turned back to the display showing the hegemony systems. Because somewhere out there, humans are praying for rescue, and humanity has never failed to answer that call. Admiral Okafor leaned back in her chair, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ma'am, what's our projected timeline for full mobilization? The first response fleet launches in 72 hours. Full deployment begins in 2 weeks. Harrison's prosthetic hand gestured to the star map. But before we send a single ship into hegemony space, we need to know exactly what we're facing, which is why we're sending in the ghosts first. At the mention of humanity's most elite reconnaissance unit, the mood in the room shifted. The Ghost Squadron wasn't officially part of any military branch. They were volunteers who took on missions so dangerous that their existence was classified at the highest levels. They were the humans who went places where no sane person would go, and somehow always came back with the information everyone needed. Admiral Martinez, Harrison continued, I want the Phantom prepped for immediate departure. Captain Torres and her crew are going to get us eyes on hegemony space before we commit our main forces. Martinez nodded. I'll have them underway within 6 hours, ma'am. As the meeting began to break up, Harrison held up one final hand. One more thing. I want it made clear to every ship captain, every Marine, every pilot in this operation. This isn't a standard military engagement. This isn't about territory or resources or political advantage. This is a rescue mission. Every human life we save is worth more than any strategic objective. She paused, looking out at the assembled commanders who would carry out this unprecedented operation. But make no mistake, anyone who has enslaved, tortured, or killed humans in the last 50 years is going to learn why our species earned the nickname Death Worlders from every other civilization we've encountered. The hegemony wanted to make hunting humans into a sport. Her smile was sharp enough to cut diamond. They're about to discover that we've made war into an art form. Chapter 3. Into the Dark, Captain. Maria Torres had been called many things. During her 15-year career in the Ghost Squadron, crazy was probably the most polite. Her ship, the Phantom, was a marvel of human engineering, a stealth cruiser capable of slipping through enemy space undetected, equipped with sensors, so advanced they could track individual life signs from orbit. What made Torres special wasn't her ship, though. It was her willingness to take it places where sane people wouldn't go, which was exactly why Admiral Harrison had chosen her for this mission. The Phantom dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system with barely a whisper. Torres stood on the bridge, her dark eyes scanning the tactical displays as her crew worked with practiced efficiency around her. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander James Park, moved from station to station, checking readings and coordinating with the ship's AI. Passive sensors are online, Captain, reported Ensign Lisa Wong from the sensor station. I'm picking up significant debris fields in the inner system. Whatever happened here, it was recent. Torres nodded grimly. According to the survivors' testimony, the hegemony attack on Kepler 442b had occurred only 3 weeks ago. If they were lucky, there might still be evidence of what had happened. If they were very lucky, there might still be survivors hiding somewhere in the system. Take us in slow, Park. I want full stealth protocols. If there are any hegemony ships still in the area, I'd prefer they not know we're here until it's too late for them to do anything about it. The Phantom began its careful approach toward the inner system, its advanced hull coating absorbing sensor pings while its engines ran so quietly they barely registered on its own instruments. This was what humanity had become masters of, moving, unseen through hostile space, gathering intelligence and striking without warning when the time was right. As they drew closer to Kepler 442b, the scale of the devastation became clear. Wong's readings painted a picture of systematic destruction that made Torres's hands clench into fists. Captain, Wong called out, her voice tight with controlled emotion. I'm reading multiple impact craters on the planet's surface, the largest city. It's gone. Just gone. And Captain, she paused, swallowing hard. I'm detecting organic compounds in the debris fields. A lot of them. The implication hung heavy in the recycled air of the bridge. The hegemony hadn't just attacked the human colony. They had obliterated it so thoroughly that pieces of the victims were still floating in space 3 weeks later. "Any signs of hegemony vessels?" Torres asked, her voice deadly calm. "Negative, Captain. Whatever they used to do this, they took it with them when they left." Torres studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. The survivors had mentioned escaping in a single ship, which meant the colony had been caught completely off guard. But colonies this far out didn't get established without some form of defensive capability. How had the hegemony managed such complete surprise? "Park, I want a full spectrum analysis of those impact craters. Whatever weapons they used, I want to know how they work." She turned to Wong. "And I want a detailed scan of the entire system. If there are any survivors down there, we're going to find them." For the next 6 hours, the Phantom conducted the most thorough reconnaissance sweep in Ghost Squadron history. What they found painted a picture of an enemy that was both technologically advanced and utterly ruthless. The hegemony weapons appeared to be some form of directed energy that could punch through planetary shields like they were tissue paper. The attack had been coordinated across multiple continents simultaneously, suggesting either a massive fleet or weapons of incredible range. Most disturbing of all, the pattern of destruction indicated that the hegemony had detailed intelligence about human settlement patterns and defensive strategies. "Captain," Park called from his station, "I think you need to see this." Torres moved to his console where he had isolated a section of the debris field orbiting the planet. At first glance, it looked like twisted metal and plastic, the remains of destroyed buildings and vehicles. But as Park enhanced the image, Torres saw what had caught his attention. It was a cage, a massive, reinforced cage designed to hold living beings. And it was far too large to have come from anything the human colonists would have built. "They brought slave cages with them," Torres said quietly. "This wasn't a military strike. This was a hunting expedition." Wong looked up from her sensor station, her face pale. "Captain, I'm picking up movement on the planet's surface. It's faint, but I think there might be survivors down there." Torres felt her heart rate increase. If there were still humans alive on Kepler 442b, they had been hiding in the ruins for 3 weeks, probably assuming they had been abandoned by the rest of humanity. They had no way of knowing that the most powerful military force in the galaxy was about to come looking for them. "Prep a stealth shuttle," Torres ordered. "I'm going down there." Park turned to her with alarm. "Captain, regulations clearly state that the safety of human life takes precedence over all other considerations," Torres interrupted. "If there are survivors down there, they need to know that help is coming. And we need to know exactly what the hegemony is capable of." 20 minutes later, Torres was piloting a stealth shuttle through Kepler 442b's atmosphere, using the Phantom's advanced sensors to guide her toward the life signs Wong had detected. What she found when she touched down in the ruins of New Geneva, the colony's former capital, would haunt her for the rest of her life. The city had been beautiful once. Even in ruins, she could see the careful planning that had gone into its construction. Wide boulevards lined with earth trees, residential districts that blended seamlessly with the local landscape, and a central district that spoke of a thriving community. Now it was a graveyard of twisted metal and shattered dreams. The life signs were coming from beneath the ruins of what appeared to have been a school. Torres approached carefully, her sidearm drawn and her scanner active. If there were hegemony forces still in the area, a single human wouldn't stand much of a chance in a direct confrontation. But what she found wasn't hegemony soldiers. It was a group of 17 humans, men, women, and children, who had been living in the school's basement for 3 weeks, surviving on emergency rations and hope. The moment Torres appeared in the entrance to their makeshift shelter, she was confronted by a man holding what appeared to be a makeshift weapon, a piece of rebar with one end sharpened to a point. He was maybe 40 years old, with clothes that had once been clean and professional but were now stained with dirt and blood. His eyes held the look of someone who had seen too much. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. "I don't know what you are, but we won't go quietly." Torres slowly raised her hands, showing she was no threat. My name is Captain Maria Torres, Terran Federation Navy. I'm here to help. For a moment, the man just stared at her. Then his improvised weapon clattered to the floor as he fell to his knees. Terran Federation? He whispered. You mean Earth? There's still an Earth? Torres knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. There's still an Earth. And there's still a Federation. And we've been looking for you. Behind the man, she could see other faces emerging from the shadows. Women clutching children, elderly people who looked like they had given up hope weeks ago, teenagers trying to be brave in the face of horror beyond their comprehension. What happened here? Torres asked gently. The man, who introduced himself as Dr. Robert Chen, the colony's former head of medicine, told her a story that made her blood run cold. The hegemony attack had come without warning in the early morning hours. Ships had appeared in orbit and begun bombarding population centers with weapons that seemed to bypass their defensive shields entirely. But the bombing had been precise, surgical, designed to kill some and terrify the rest. Then the ground forces had arrived. The creatures the colonists called harvesters had moved through the ruins with methodical efficiency, gathering survivors, and loading them into the massive cages Torres had seen in orbit. They had taken the young and healthy first, leaving the old and injured for later collection. My daughter, Dr. Chen said, tears streaming down his face. She was at the university when they came. I watched them load her onto one of their ships. She was calling for me and I couldn't do anything. Torres felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. Around the galaxy, similar scenes had played out dozens of times. Humans crying out for help that never came. Families, torn apart by creatures that hunted them like animals. Until now. Dr. Chen, she said, helping him to his feet. I need you to listen to me very carefully. My ship is in orbit right now, and in 2 weeks, the largest military fleet in human history is going to arrive in this system. We're not just here to rescue you. We're here to find every human the hegemony has taken, and we're going to bring them home. She looked around at the faces of the survivors, people who had spent 3 weeks believing they were alone in a hostile universe. Your daughter is still alive, and we're going to get her back. For the first time in 3 weeks, the survivors of Kepler 442b began to hope. What none of them knew was that 3 star systems away, a hegemony patrol ship had detected the Phantom's ion trail and was already transmitting a warning to their home fleet. The element of surprise that humanity had counted on was about to vanish. The war was about to begin whether they were ready for it or not. Chapter 4. The first battle fleet Admiral Martinez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable flagship of the Terran Federation's first response fleet and watched as 47 of humanity's most advanced warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Around him, the bridge crew worked with the quiet efficiency of professionals who had trained for this moment their entire careers. But as the tactical displays came online and began showing sensor readings from the target system, Martinez realized that no amount of training could have prepared them for what they were about to face. Admiral, called out Commander Sarah Kim from the sensor station, I'm reading massive energy signatures throughout the system. Whatever's down there, it's big. Martinez studied the holographic display that materialized above the command table. The system, designated Hegemony Prime in their intelligence files, was supposed to be lightly defended according to Captain Torres's reconnaissance. What the sensors were showing looked more like the most heavily fortified position in the galaxy. How many ships? Martinez asked calmly. Kim worked at her console for several seconds before responding. I count at least 200 vessels, Admiral. And they're not running. They're moving to intercept. Around the bridge, Martinez could feel the tension ratchet up several notches. The first response fleet was powerful, but it had been designed for rapid strikes and surgical operations. Going head-to-head with a force nearly 5 times their size wasn't exactly what they had trained for. But Martinez had been fighting impossible odds for most of his career. During the Proxima Border Wars, he had held off an entire crystal entity fleet with 12 ships. In the Centauri Rebellion, he had broken a siege that had lasted 8 months with a single decisive engagement. The fact that the enemy outnumbered him 5-1 just meant he was going to have to be creative. Signal all ships, Martinez ordered. Assume formation Delta 7. I want our heavy cruisers in the center, destroyers on the flanks, and fighters deployed in screening formations. And Commander Kim? I want continuous sensor sweeps of the entire system. If there are human life signs anywhere in this system, I want to know about it. As the fleet began moving into attack formation, Martinez opened a secure channel to his division commanders. Admiral Chen commanded the heavy assault group. Captain Rodriguez led the destroyer screens. Colonel Martinez, no relation despite the name, controlled the marine assault forces that would be needed if they managed to find and board hegemony vessels carrying human prisoners. Ladies and gentlemen, Martinez said into the comm, intelligence suggests the hegemony has been taking human slaves for 50 years. That means some of the people we're here to rescue have never seen Earth. They've never known that humanity grew into something powerful enough to come looking for them. Through the bridge's main viewport, he could see the approaching hegemony fleet. The enemy ships were unlike anything in the Federation's databases, organic-looking vessels that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested biotechnology rather than traditional engineering. Today we show them what it means to be human. Today we show the galaxy that nobody, and I mean nobody, hunts our species without consequences. The first hegemony ships came into weapons range exactly 18 minutes after the fleet had dropped out of hyperspace. What happened next would be studied in military academies for the next century. The hegemony opened fire first, launching volleys of what appeared to be living projectiles, organic missiles that twisted and writhed as they sought their targets. The Federation ships responded with precisely coordinated defensive fire, point defense systems tracking and destroying the incoming threats with mechanical precision. But Martinez wasn't interested in a defensive engagement. The moment the enemy weapons were neutralized, he gave the order that changed everything. All ships execute Alpha Strike. Target their command vessels first. What the hegemony had never encountered before was humanity's approach to space warfare. Where most galactic civilizations preferred long-range engagements with massive energy weapons, humans had developed a doctrine based on speed, precision, and overwhelming firepower delivered at close range. The Federation destroyers accelerated to attack speed, using their advanced engines to close distance while their larger companions provided covering fire. As they reached optimal range, each destroyer unleashed a barrage of kinetic projectiles. Solid metal slugs accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. The effect on the hegemony formation was devastating. Ships that had seemed almost alive suddenly found themselves dealing with weapons that struck faster than their organic systems could react. In the space of 30 seconds, Martinez's force had crippled 8 enemy vessels and thrown their entire formation into chaos. But the hegemony adapted quickly. The surviving ships began deploying a new weapon, energy fields that seemed to drain power from Federation systems on contact. Several destroyers found their weapons offline as the strange energy washed over them. "Admiral," Kim called out, "I'm reading power fluctuations across the fleet. Whatever that energy field is, it's affecting our primary systems." Martinez smiled grimly. This was exactly the kind of problem humanity had learned to solve. Signal. All ships to switch to secondary power systems and deploy countermeasures, Package 7. What happened next demonstrated why human military doctrine was so feared by other galactic powers. Every Federation ship began deploying specialized drones, small, independently powered units that could operate even when their parent vessels were disabled. Within minutes, the space around the fleet was filled with thousands of autonomous systems, each one targeting hegemony vessels with precision strikes. The drone swarms overwhelmed the hegemony's ability to respond. Their organic weapon systems, designed to target large vessels, couldn't track and engage the smaller units effectively. Ship after ship found itself under attack from dozens of tiny opponents, each one capable of delivering devastating damage to critical systems. But Martinez's real objective wasn't to destroy the hegemony fleet. It was to find the human prisoners. As the battle raged around them, specialized scanning vessels in the center of the Federation formation were conducting deep penetration sensor sweeps of every enemy ship. "Admiral!" Kim's voice cut through the bridge chatter with barely controlled excitement. I'm reading human life signs on 17 different vessels. Hundreds of them, sir. Martinez felt his heart rate spike. After 50 years of slavery, they had finally found them. Signal Colonel Martinez. I want boarding teams prepped and ready for immediate deployment. And I want those ships disabled, not destroyed. What followed was perhaps the most complex military operation in human history. While the main fleet continued to engage the hegemony, specialized assault ships began targeting the vessels containing human prisoners. Using precision weapons designed to disable, rather than destroy, Federation forces systematically crippled the slave ships while Marine assault teams prepared for boarding operations. The first boarding team was led by Colonel Ana Martinez herself. As her assault shuttle approached the hull of a massive hegemony vessel, she could see through the ship's transparent sections the silhouettes of humans, dozens of them, held in conditions that made her want to personally strangle every alien involved in their capture. "Breaching charges ready, Colonel," reported Sergeant Williams, her senior NCO. "Light them up," Martinez ordered. The charges tore through the hegemony ship's hull with surgical precision, creating entry points that led directly to the prisoner compartments. Martinez was the first through the breach, her assault rifle ready and her armor's sensors scanning for hostile life forms. What she found in that first compartment would stay with her forever. They were humans, but many of them had never seen Earth. Children who had been born in captivity, speaking languages that were mixtures of human dialects and alien words they had been forced to learn. Adults who bore the marks of decades of abuse, but whose eyes still held the defiant spark that marked them as unmistakably human. When the first prisoners saw Martinez's armor, marked with the insignia of the Terran Federation, they began to weep. "Are you real?" whispered an elderly woman who appeared to be the senior prisoner. "Are you really from Earth?" Martinez removed her helmet, showing her human face. "We're real, and we're here to take you home." The rescue operation took 6 hours. By the time it was complete, Martinez's fleet had extracted 3,147 human prisoners from 17 different vessels. The hegemony fleet had been completely destroyed or disabled, with no Federation casualties and minimal damage to their own ships. But as Martinez stood in the Indomitable's main briefing room, listening to the stories of the freed prisoners, he realized that this first victory was just the beginning. The woman who appeared to be the prisoners' unofficial leader was named Dr. Elizabeth Reeves. She had been taken from a research station 43 years ago and had spent more than 4 decades in hegemony captivity. What she told Martinez about the extent of the hegemony slave operations was both horrifying and strategically crucial. "There are dozens of facilities," she said, her voice steady despite the trauma she had endured. "They've been systematically hunting human colonies for generations. Some of the people in those facilities have never seen the outside of a slave compound." She handed Martinez a crude map she had drawn from memory. Star positions and shipping. Routes that the hegemony had used during her captivity. "Admiral, there are thousands of us out there, maybe tens of thousands, and they're not just keeping us as laborers, they're studying us, learning how we think, how we fight, how we organize ourselves." Martinez felt a chill run down his spine. "Studying us for what?" Dr. Reeves met his eyes directly. "They're planning an invasion of human space, Admiral. Everything they've done for the last 50 years has been preparation. They know where Earth is. They know how strong your defenses are, and they're coming." As if summoned by her words, Commander Kim's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Admiral Martinez to the bridge immediately. We're receiving a transmission from the Hegemony High Command. They want to talk." Martinez made his way to the bridge, where the main viewer showed the image of a creature that defied easy description. It was vaguely humanoid, but with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. When it spoke, its voice carried harmonics that made human ears ache. "Humans," it said, the words translated by the ship's computer. "You have interfered with hegemony operations for the last time. Your species was marked for harvest 50 of your years ago. We have studied you. We understand your weaknesses. Your rescue operation has merely accelerated our timeline." Martinez stepped forward, his expression hard as stone. I am Fleet Admiral Martinez of the Terran Federation. I'm here to inform you that the hunting of humans ends now. Release all human prisoners in your custody immediately, or face the consequences. The creature that might have been smiling, it was hard to tell with its shifting features. Admiral Martinez, your fleet is impressive, but you have attacked only one of our outer stations. We control 47 star systems and possess a military force that numbers in the millions. What can one species do against the hegemony? Martinez smiled back, and there was something in his expression that made several bridge officers take an involuntary step backward. You're about to find out. He cut the transmission and turned to his communications officer. Send a message to Admiral Harrison at Fleet Command. Tell her we've found them, we've freed the first group, and we're going to need everything we've got. He paused, looking out at the stars where thousands of humans still waited for rescue. And tell her the hegemony has made a critical error in judgment. They think they've been studying humanity for 50 years. What they don't realize is that we've been preparing for war for 200. As the first response fleet began preparing for the long journey home with their rescued prisoners, none of them noticed the small hegemony probe that had been silently observing the entire battle. The probe's databanks were filled with detailed recordings of human military capabilities, tactical doctrine, and ship specifications. By the time the Federation fleet reached human space, every hegemony facility in the galaxy would know exactly what they were facing. The war for humanity's survival was about to begin in earnest. Epilogue: The Galaxy Awakens. 6 months after the Battle of Hegemony Prime, the war had spread across 12 star systems. What had begun as a rescue mission had evolved into the largest military conflict in galactic history. The hegemony had mobilized forces that dwarfed anything in the Federation's intelligence estimates, while humanity had responded by deploying military assets that most civilizations didn't even know existed. Admiral Elena Harrison stood in the Strategic Operations Center on Luna, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions across half the galaxy. The past 6 months had aged her visibly. Her hair was now completely white, and the lines around her eyes spoke of sleepless nights and impossible decisions. But the expression on her face was one of grim satisfaction. "Admiral," reported her aide, Commander Jackson, "the final casualty reports from Operation Thunderstrike are in. We lost 43 ships, but we successfully extracted 8,500 human prisoners from the hegemony facility at Epsilon Eridani." Harrison nodded, adding those numbers to the running tally she kept in her head. In 6 months, they had rescued more than 50,000 humans from hegemony captivity. The cost had been high, nearly 100 Federation ships destroyed and thousands of casualties among their crews. But not a single rescue operation had been called off due to losses. "What's our intelligence on the hegemony's central command structure?" Harrison asked. Commander Jackson activated a new display showing the Galactic core region. Dr. Reeves and the other long-term prisoners have provided detailed information about hegemony leadership. They're ruled by something called the Grand Collective, a group of the oldest and most powerful hegemony leaders who view human slavery as both an economic necessity and a sacred duty. Harrison studied the display, her strategic mind already working through possibilities. And their location? The Kepler-62 system, about 40 light-years from the galactic core. It's heavily defended, at least 500 ships and multiple orbital defense platforms. Jackson paused. "Admiral, even with our full fleet deployment, a direct assault on their home system would be suicidal," Harrison finished. "Which is exactly why we're not going to do it." She walked over to another display, this one showing the positions of non-human civilizations throughout the galaxy. For the first time in 6 months, Harrison allowed herself a small smile. "Commander, what's the status of our diplomatic initiatives?" Jackson consulted his datapad. "The Altarian Republic has agreed to provide logistical support. The Vegan Confederation is offering intelligence sharing, and..." He paused, clearly impressed by what he was about to report. "And the crystal entities have formally declared the hegemony to be enemies of all sentient life." Harrison's smile widened. The crystal entities were the most powerful non-human civilization in the galaxy, silicon-based beings who had fought humanity to a standstill 20 years earlier, before eventually signing a mutual non-aggression pact. If they were willing to side with humans against the hegemony, it meant the war had taken on galactic significance. It seems, Harrison said quietly, that the galaxy has decided which side represents civilization and which side represents slavery. As, if summoned by her words, the communication board chimed with an incoming priority transmission, the main display activated, showing the face of Captain Maria Torres aboard the Phantom. Behind her, Harrison could see the interior of what appeared to be a massive space station. "Admiral Harrison," Torres reported, "I'm transmitting from the Hegemony Logistics Base at Wolf 359. We've successfully completed Operation Deep Strike. The base is secure, and you're not going to believe what we found here." Harrison leaned forward. Deep Strike had been one of their most ambitious operations, a stealth assault on a hegemony supply depot that intelligence suggested was crucial to their slave operations. "Report, Captain." Torres's expression was a mixture of triumph and horror. "Ma'am, this wasn't just a supply depot. It was a processing center. We've rescued 15,000 humans, including—" She paused, clearly struggling with the magnitude of what she had discovered. "Including children who were born here. Some of them are third-generation prisoners, Admiral. They've never known anything but captivity." The implications hit Harrison like a physical blow. The hegemony hadn't just been enslaving humans, they had been breeding them in captivity for decades. "There's more," Torres continued. "We found extensive records of hegemony operations. Admiral, they've been planning an invasion of Earth for 20 years. They have detailed intelligence on our defenses, our fleet positions, everything. This whole slave operation was just the preparation phase." Harrison felt something cold settle in her stomach. "How detailed?" "They know about Luna Base. They know about our shipyards at Proxima Centauri. They even know about the classified defensive installations in the Oort cloud." Torres's voice was grim. "Ma'am, if they had launched their invasion 6 months ago, they might have succeeded. But they didn't," Harrison said firmly, "because a group of desperate colonists managed to get a distress signal through their blockade, and because humanity has spent 200 years learning that we never, ever abandon our own." She turned to Commander Jackson. "Signal all division. Commanders, I want a full strategic assessment within 12 hours, and I want contingency plans for the defense of Earth and all core systems." "Yes, ma'am," Jackson replied, already moving to carry out her orders. But Harrison wasn't done. She turned back to the display showing Captain Torres. "Captain, I want every piece of intelligence you found transmitted to Fleet Command immediately. And I want those rescued prisoners given full medical and psychological support. Some of them may be the key to understanding hegemony weaknesses. Already in progress, Admiral." As Torres signed off, Harrison found herself alone with her thoughts for the first time in weeks. Through the observation windows of the Strategic Operations Center, she could see Earth hanging in space, a blue marble that represented the home of humanity and the target of an alien empire that had spent decades preparing to destroy it. But the hegemony had made one critical miscalculation. They had assumed that humanity would be the same species they had been studying through enslaved colonists, desperate, scattered, and easy to manipulate through fear. They had no idea that the humans who had built the Terran Federation were descendants of the same species that had survived ice ages, global wars, and cosmic disasters. They were the children of explorers who had walked on alien worlds, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel, and warriors who had fought crystalline hive minds to a standstill. The hegemony thought they were hunting prey. They were about to discover they had awakened a predator. 3 hours later, Harrison stood before the assembled representatives of 17 different galactic civilizations. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called at humanity's request, and for the first time in the Council's history, a human was addressing them not as a junior member seeking guidance, but as the leader of a military force that had achieved what many had thought impossible. "Honored representatives," Harrison began, her voice carrying to every corner of the great assembly hall. 6 months ago, The Terran Federation discovered that an empire calling itself the Hegemony had been systematically enslaving human populations for 50 years. We have since learned that this empire poses a threat not just to humanity, but to every free civilization in the galaxy. The assembly hall, which could hold representatives from thousands of worlds, had fallen completely silent. The hegemony operates on a simple principle, that some species exist to serve others. They have turned slavery into an industrial process, and they view the conquest of free civilizations as their divine right. Harrison's voice hardened. Today, I am here to inform you that humanity will not allow this cancer to spread further. She activated a holographic display that showed the current military situation. Red markers indicated hegemony-controlled systems, while blue showed the expanding sphere of human rescue operations. In 6 months, we have liberated more than 75,000 human prisoners and destroyed or crippled over 300 hegemony vessels. But this is just the beginning. The hegemony has enslaved members of at least 12 different species, and their ultimate goal is the conquest of the entire galactic spiral arm. A representative from the Andromedan Commonwealth stood up. Admiral Harrison, while we appreciate humanity's efforts to rescue your people, surely a diplomatic solution? Representative. Harrison interrupted. The hegemony's response to our diplomatic overtures was to accelerate their invasion timeline and begin executing prisoners. There is no negotiating with an empire that views slavery as a sacred duty. She gestured to the display, which now showed intelligence gathered from rescued prisoners. We have evidence that the hegemony is planning to attack at least 47 different civilizations over the next decade. Your worlds are on that list, Representative. All of your worlds are. The silence in the assembly hall was deafening. Humanity is prepared to fight this war alone if necessary, Harrison continued. We will rescue every enslaved human in the galaxy, and we will ensure that the hegemony never again threatens a free civilization. But we would prefer to fight alongside allies who understand that some evils cannot be negotiated with. They can only be destroyed. Over the next 4 hours, 18 different civilizations formally joined what became known as the Liberation Alliance. The crystal entities provided their most advanced weapons technology. The Vegan Confederation offered their expertise in biological warfare. The Altarian Republic committed their entire merchant fleet to logistics support, but it was the humans who would provide the military leadership and the strategic vision that would guide the war to its conclusion. As Harrison returned to Luna base, she found a message waiting for her from Dr. Elizabeth Reeves, the former prisoner who had become humanity's most valuable intelligence asset on hegemony operations. Admiral, the message began, I've been working with your xenobiology team to analyze hegemony technology and social structure. I believe we've found their critical weakness. The hegemony leadership structure is based on a rigid hierarchy that depends on constant communication with their central command. If we could disrupt that communication, Harrison smiled as she read the rest of the message. Dr. Reeves had spent 43 years in captivity, studying her captors and waiting for the moment when she could help bring them down. That moment had finally arrived. Within a week, Operation Silence had been approved and was entering its final planning stages. Instead of a direct assault on the hegemony home system, humanity would strike at the communication networks that held their empire together. Cut off from central command, individual hegemony forces would become vulnerable to the kind of focused attacks that had made the Federation Navy legendary. But the most important part of the plan wasn't military, it was psychological. Every rescued human prisoner would be given the opportunity to participate in the liberation of their former captors' other victims. The people who had suffered under hegemony rule would be the ones to end it. 6 months after a desperate distress signal had reached Station Theta-7, humanity was no longer fighting a rescue mission. They were leading a galactic war for the principle that no sentient being should live in chains, and they were winning. The final battle for the hegemony home system would take place in 3 months. When it was over, the galaxy would remember that when humans said never again, they meant it. In the depths of space, thousands of enslaved beings from dozens of different worlds looked up at the stars and whispered prayers in languages the hegemony had tried to make them forget. They didn't know that help was coming, but somehow they still had hope. They were about to discover that hope, when backed by human determination and alien allies, was the most powerful force in the galaxy. The age of the hegemony was ending. The age of liberation had begun, and it all started because someone somewhere refused to stop believing that if they called for help, their fellow humans would answer. They had been right. The end.